Hi, everyone. How's everybody feeling? Good? Great. All right, guys. Thank you for joining today to our gesture navigation best practices. My name is Diego ZULUAGA. I'm joined by my colleague, Aaron LABIAGA. We are both developer relations engineers working on the system UI team at Google. Today, we have a packed agenda for you. We're going to talk about gesture navigation best practices, and pretty much we'll take you on a journey of where we are with gesture navigation, what's going to happen, what is the vision, and what you can do in your organizations to embrace gesture navigation. All right. So let's get on what's the current state on gesture nav. This is super quick. Most of you guys are familiar with gesture navigation, of course. But for those of you, let's set the baseline. These are the main 4 capabilities. This is nothing new again. Pretty much gesture navigation is accessible through these 3 regions in the screen, right? So you got the abilities to go home, to swiping back from your apps. You got to go to an overview where you can see all the apps running. Then the back gesture, which is kind of like the stuff that we want to focus our talk today, and the app quick switch. To just be more visual about it, I know the color is not the greatest, but please bear with us. We're trying our best. In this example, yeah, gesture navigation, pretty much the app collapses into the screen, or it just disappears when you use your home gesture from the bottom, right? The back gesture is accessible through the navigation bars on the left and right side by swiping in. And there are some APIs that I'm pretty sure some of you have leveraged in the past to disable or exclude areas on the navigation bars. And then the overview, which is, hey, you're gonna wanna go apps running, you swipe up, you're able to dismiss some apps, or you're able to navigate to a different app. And app switching, which pretty much you use the hook at the bottom of the screen to navigate from one app to another, right? So those are the 4 capabilities, and we have learned from Android Q a few things, and we want to actually be very open with you about what's in gesture navigation, what's going on, and how are we planning to address these issues. The key learnings that the main key learning is that gesture navigation is a long journey. It takes time for users to learn gesture navigations, and some of them fall back into the three-button navigation mode, right? So it's not an immediate adoption that we're getting in three-button navigation mode, even though 30% of devices currently leverage gesture navigation. But we want to change that, right? And the main things that we are trying to address based on our research is something that we call backfalsing. That means that accidentally, when you are in your app, you hit that back gesture and you land, or you execute an action that erroneously perhaps delete an email. And many of the apps have learned how to overcome these by being creative. But we want to make it happen across the whole ecosystem. Every app, developers shouldn't have to think about how do I address this issue from the get-go. So the platform should be able to provide this. The next thing is conflicting gestures. Sometimes some areas of the screen, the carousel, the typical example, when you navigate left and right, you run into these issues that you land into a different activity or fragment, or you land into the launcher. So we want to change that. So there is work happening right now. The next one is also very similar to the left and right when you navigate through seekers, slide bars. In this example, typical example is that you are on a streaming media, you try to skip forward, or move forward that slider bar, and then you end up landing back home, right? That's kind of like the most common scenario. And to do that, the last one is also how you embrace gesture navigation, also embracing giving a better user experience, more modern user experience. We want you to be able to not only make sure that the back gestures work properly, but actually embrace the entire gesture navigation principles. And one of them is embracing edge-to-edge. There are some APIs that have been, again, since 2019 available to do edge-to-edge and exclusion of recs, but still there hasn't been proper adoption, and we want to learn from you. So drawing behind the navigation bar and the status bar is actually something that we want to promote more intentionally. All right, in the end, the theme that we're currently, right now, it's about developing experiences that are predictable, responsive, and harmonious. Predictable, we mean that users shouldn't have to wonder what's going to happen when I hit that back gesture. I should be able to learn exactly where I'm going to land, even though before committing that action, right? So instead of that back arrow showing you, I don't know what's going to happen, you get an idea of, hey, I'm going to land somewhere else. We'll show you more in detail. And responsive, that means that the experience should be smooth. Those animations that you're going to see and that are actually already available, you should be able to handle them, and the system should be able to handle them very smoothly. And harmonious, meaning that the whole experience should be based on predictable, right? So not only right now we are releasing the back-to-home animation, but the experience at the end is that the whole app leverages is predictable. So even though you are in a component and you use the back gesture, you are able to see what's going to happen, where you're going to land. We're going to show you some mocks to give you an idea of where I'm talking about. All right, so the next step is the how, right? The how is what APIs are ready, what APIs are in kind of like early access, which ones you can start leveraging them and are not in production, or they are behind some flags, right? So the first one, we're talking about the new predictive back gesture. Can you guys raise your hand? Who knows about predictive back gesture? All right, very few hands, right? Even though we released it at I/O, there's a talk and there's a code lab. This tells me that you guys, this is great. This is exactly what we want. We want to get in your hands this knowledge. So thank you for sharing that. So just to give you a of a history about gesture navigation and the back gesture, it predates from the early beginnings of Android. It's been there the whole time, right? Even in hardware, back buttons existed in devices. Then it has evolved into 3-button navigation mode, and now there's the gesture navigation that is currently existent, that is actually that back arrow or chevron that you see on the bottom of the screen, right? So how do we move forward into the next generation of gesture navigation? The first part is, this is not gonna happen overnight. We are being very careful about what we ship and making sure that we listen to the community. But we approximately in 2 years, across those 2 years, you'll start going to see the vision of gesture navigation, but we are delivering the APIs for you to get started right now. So on the left, the first animation describes the current gesture navigation, but the one in the middle actually shows you that before you hit that back gesture, you're gonna see a different kind of back arrow along with that animation that shows you that it collapses into the Chrome icon, right? And the last one is actually the experience that as a developer you will be able to build. This is kind of like a calendar app that actually you open an individual activity or event, and when you use that back gesture, it collapses into that event. But it's gonna work across many type of components, right? So the idea is that the whole ecosystem embraces back gesture. Cool. So sorry. right, so just very quick. How many of you, what's the tool gesture daily average user per user? Take a guess. How many of you say 50 times a day? Please raise your hands. None of you. Okay, 100. Okay, 1, 2, yeah, a few hands. How about 300? All right, most of you. 500? All right. I guess, yeah, you guessed it. Yeah, it's pretty massive, right? If you think about 300 times, every user that interacts with Android leverages the back gesture. I mean, it's huge. The impact that gesture navigation and predictive is going to have on your users is huge in the user experience. So definitely this is something that we are taking very seriously, and our research shows that even our legacy back gesture, as I mentioned to you, lacks with the current gesture navigation, and we want to change that. As you can see on the left-hand side, with predictive back gesture, users now switch from the three-button navigation mode into the gesture navigation. So that's to give you the certainty that once you start enabling your app with predictive back gesture, your user will be happier. All right. So how do we make this happen? The next steps is, there's a code lab. Maybe some of you have tried it. I'm looking forward to feedback about that code lab. But that's what we are going to walk you through in this session, along with other examples. So the first thing to enable gesture nav is, first, you need to opt in. Second, you need to create a callback to migrate your existing code into the new ahead-of-time model. And third is you need to stop intercepting the back event. We're going to elaborate on that. All right, so opting in means you are going to leave your old ways and migrate over to the ahead-of-time APIs. These APIs have been in Android X, so if you are already using Android X activity APIs, you're all good. But in my experience and based on the learning that we have with partners, many apps are still leveraging the unsupported APIs, which are key code back and onBackPressed. So if you find that your app is leveraging one of these APIs, there is an action item in here for you. So by enabling the enable onBack invoked callback, that means that in Android 13, the code base under the hood will start leveraging onBack invoked callback, either directly through using the APIs that I'm going to show you in a bit, or through Android X. All right. And the last thing is, it's really important that you have this in mind, that in Android 14 is no longer be optional. So your apps automatically will be opt-in. So why? Again, we want to make this experience as harmonious as possible. So a user should no wonder, with this app, do I get the legacy experience or the predictive experience? Should be across seamlessly for them. All right. The next step is definitely, for most of the apps, definitely you probably end up using Android X activity, right? From 1.6, under the hood, it will leverage that onBack invoked callback, so you don't need to worry about it. But the API looks like this. It's an onBackPressed callback. You're probably familiar with this. It takes a Boolean. That means that if you create a callback enable, that means that automatically, when it gets in the dispatcher, when you register with the dispatcher, you are intercepting that gesture navigation. So you are taking over and telling the system, hey, if the user swipes left or right, I'm taking control, right? And you implement the handle onBackPressed method to implement the code that you need. You can either remove that callback or you can disable it. You can remove that callback directly on the callback, or you can actually you cannot unregister it. You just add it to the callbacks, but you can remove it directly by calling remove function on the callback. So, and this is available at the component fragment, app compat, and component dialog. So make sure, again, this is going to keep growing because we're going to include this in other components. The next one is the platform API. So the platform API is what is new in Android 13. There's gonna, well, now it's available. You can try it right away. But there is the onBackInvoked callback that has a function onBackInvoked. It's very similar to the Android X, but the onBackInvoked is the same as the previous one that I mentioned. And the dispatcher is also similar, but you register the callback and you unregister the callback. But the principle is the same. If you have registered a callback, you need to make sure that you unregister these callbacks to make sure that your app is not taking over. All right. And the one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this works at a lower level, right? So in this case, the API also surfaces the priority. That means that if you forget about, by default, the priority is the default, but if you want to handle it in IMEs, input method editors, you have to make sure that you use the proper priority. I've seen that happen in very few, but in most cases, you don't need to set the priority because it takes priority by default. Cool. So, and the second step is create a callback. In this case, pretty much in this implementation, you can tell that you create an onBackPressed callback. In this case, we implement the handle onBackPressed function. And here, it's a web view that actually, when you know that you can go back in the web view, that means that if you have multiple pages in the stack, you can go to the previous one if you use the back gesture. By default, the web view, if you use the back gesture, it will end up looking like this. Right? So you go through the question 1. This is a web view that has a survey. You go to question 2, and then question 3. And if you use the gesture back, you end up in the fragment. So you end up losing information, right? The user ends up losing information. So how do we fix that, right? The first step is you add this callback, you register the callback, but there is a problem in here. So in this case, you are going back into the question. Now you're going through the survey, but when you land in question number 1, it doesn't let you go, right? So you solve a problem, but you introduce other issues. And I have seen that happening very often. So the paradigm is a little bit different because developers are used to the on-key callback or the onBackPressed APIs, the unsupported APIs. So make sure that before you do the implementation, try this code lab to make sure that you are going in the right path. Or let us know. We'll be ready to help you. So, right. So the next step is implementing step number 3. Step number 3, what it does is to disable the callback. And this is every app has its own implementation. In this case, since this is a web view, what we do is we override the doUpdate visit history. And the doUpdate visit history tells, hey, when can I disable this callback? And that means when the web view no longer has pages to go back, you disable that ahead of time. So the system knows, okay, you're telling me that you are no longer intercepting that callback, and now I'm able to go back to the previous fragment, right? So think about it. It's a little bit. It takes a little bit of time to get a hang of it, especially if you're coming from the unsupported APIs. All right, and the experience looks like this, right? You are able to go to the fragment. So the finished product is something like this. You go through the survey, you go through all the questions, question number 2, question number 3, and then when you start going back, you're able to go back through each one of the questions. Question number 1, you land into the fragment, no problem. You land into the first fragment, and then you see that animation. That's the animation that has been introduced. You need to enable the developer option, predictive back animations. It's, of course, disabled. And you need to opt in as well, right? So you need to execute the step number 1. So right now, we are looking forward to your feedback. Definitely, the whole team is very eager to listen to you because in these stages, it's when we have the most impact on the apps and making sure that we get it right the first time. All right, so with that, we move into the handling back gesture conflicts. This is not a new topic. This has been a topic that has been in DroidCon 2019, but we want to reinforce it. And we actually want to know more about your impressions on the APIs. Have you had any issues adopting this API, or you're happy, right? But the API to handle conflicting gesture looks like this. The use case pretty much is apps that use seek bars, slider, drag handles, and in this case, you are able to exclude regions of the screen to remove back gesture. So when the user interacts with the gesture navigation, the back gesture doesn't go back to the previous fragment or activity, right? So this is a very tricky API. I'm telling you up front because and there have been some, safeguards in place to make sure that accidentally, for instance, you don't exclude the entire back navigation bars, because you could potentially disable the entire navigation and end up with the user logged into your app. Of course, they can use the escape hatch by using the home gesture, but it's not a pleasant experience for your users. So use it very carefully, making sure that you do the right testing on your app. The next thing, it looks like this. It's a view. It's at the view level. It's set system gesture exclusion rect. It's a mouthful, but it takes a list of rects. You have to calculate those rects in advance, and that's also a tricky part. Calculating those coordinates on the screen could take, but it's good because it's very low level. That means that if you want to make it higher level, you can implement some higher level functions on top of it. The idea is that you can, typically apps end up implementing on layout for more static content, like fragments that don't move around. You implement it typically on layout. You calculate the exclusion rate outside of that function, and inside of that function is where you call the set system gesture exclusion rects. Another view of this is on draw. This is meant for apps that have more dynamic content. So if you move, you have these frame-by-frame activities. You can capture them and exclude them frame by frame. These are very tricky to implement, but there are use cases for it. And last is, this is an example that you could, in some cases, apps implement it using layouts. Using layouts, so if you don't want to create a new class or extend from any class, you can use it on layout, do on layout, and it's the same thing. You set it at the view level, or you use the view compat static function set system gesture exclusion recs, and you pass the view. Cool. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to my colleague Aaron.
Hello? Oh, great. Perfect. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Hi, Aaron. So I want to talk about the APIs that maximize the screen real estate for your app and how we enable this. I also want to note that, as Diego mentioned, a lot of these APIs are actually not new. They've evolved over time, but have been pretty stable since 2019. But it's more important to evaluate them now as we are moving towards a world where our gesture navigation is becoming the de facto. So the first set of APIs I want to talk about is edge-to-edge and configuring your app so that it's drawn edge-to-edge. So for those who are not familiar, edge-to-edge is when you lay out your app so that it's drawn over the confines of the system or window insets. So that is the status bar and the navigation bar. So as you can see here, it's visually more appealing. here's an example of the navigation bar at the bottom and it adjusting to the background contents of the page. So how do we do this? Fairly straightforward, 3 steps. Lay out your app in full screen, change the system bar colors and transparency, and if necessary, handle any visual overlaps. Great, so the first step is to lay out your app in full screen. So the line of code to look at here is the last one where we set the decor fit systems window to false. So what this is doing is that we are telling the framework not to fit the content view within the confines of the insets and to draw beyond it. Great. So now we are changing the color of the system bars, and in here you can see the first 2 items. We are changing the colors to transparent. Easy enough. And if you're lucky, well, if you're unlucky, you'll have to handle any visual overlaps. So what does that mean? It means that any interactive elements that you have that are near the insets, navigation insets, will probably overlap. So here on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that the fob is actually overlapping with the 3-button navigation bar. So how do we resolve this? So we have a listener on the view, set on apply window insets listener. Basically, this takes over the policy of how window insets are applied. So here's the opportunity where you add additional padding, in this case, margins to your view. Taking into consideration the insets. So at the bottom right-hand side, you'll see that it's resolved after you apply these changes. Yes, I showed an example of the 3-button mode, but the same issue applies in gesture nav, where the non-visual gesture insets are there. I'm not actually sure. Yeah, you can see it. Great. So here it is resolved, and the fob is pushed into a place where there's nothing conflicting. So once you've done all this, you will have a better visual aesthetics and fluidity with the app. So here you'll see that the contents of the content view is drawn behind the status bar, and as before, the navigation bar is adaptive to the background. Great. So now I will talk about immersive and going in immersive mode. So what does this mean? Basically, you are, funnily enough, immersing your users to a better visual and interactive experience of your app. So that means the absence of the status bar and the navigation bar. So the guidance is that we should definitely reserve this for experiences that warrant it. As you saw previously, when viewing pictures or videos of your loved one, you definitely don't want to see the status icons like there above the baby's head, and you want to you maximize the utilization of the screen when reading content. Great. So here are some examples where this would apply: photos, reading books, and gaming and editors. Take note that gaming and editors, there's a unique experience where you not only want to immerse your users visually, but interactively. And obviously, that would mean making sure that the gesture navigation doesn't conflict with how the user interacts with the screen. More on that later, but first off, how do we hide the system bars? So we get the window insets controller, we define the behavior of the hidden system bars, and then you hide it. As you notice here, we are hiding these system bars, but we do have the granularity of hiding the navigation bar or the status bar, or both in this case. So another thing to note is the line of code before that, where we define the behavior of the hidden system bars. So in this case, the behavior would be the user can swipe at the bottom and invoke the gesture nav, so giving the user the opportunity to navigate or escape the app. And there's a period when the system insets would disappear again. Great. So as I mentioned earlier, with games and editors, this is where the mode has to be considered. And there's 2 immersive modes to consider. And in that case, there's something called sticky, where we want full utility of the screen, versus non-sticky, where you don't require that precision of the swiping gestures. So using a drawing app as an example, here on the left-hand side, you'll see the subpar non-sticky experience, where the person is drawing the sun but is invoking the back gesture inadvertently. So not quite sunny there. That should be a frowning face, actually. And on the right-hand side, there's the sticky mode that allows the user to make full utilization of the app, and they can draw at the edges. So yeah, how do we implement this? On layout and using the same listener as previously with the handling overlaps, we are updating the gesture exclusion regs, which Diego went over before. So here, when the navigation bar is hidden, basically we want to make sure that we exclude and allow the user to use the gesture insets. And if it's showing, we obviously don't want that. Perfect. Yeah, so that's it. Once again, please consider and evaluate whether this makes sense for your app. Handing it over to Diego to wrap it up.
Hello. OK. Yep. So pretty much, we're just recapping our session. The key takeaways for you guys is the current focus is on predictability and responsiveness. Try the APIs. The APIs embrace these principles. We want your app nav ready. The APIs are going to be released in August on Android 13 release, and you will be able to test the animation that we show you. And definitely, we want your feedback. So please submit that through our component or ping me on Twitter. Feel free to reach us out any way you can. But yeah, we want you to get started as soon as possible. It's a little bit of urgency for many apps because it takes time. It's not a trivial ask for apps that have been using the unsupported APIs. And yeah, while you do that, make sure that your app ensures compatibility with edge-to-edge and gesture navigation and using immersive modes as well. And for the future, stay tuned because we'll be releasing more and more of these experiences. As I mentioned, it's not only for the back to home. It's going to be across all components in Android that you'll start experiencing. And there's way more to come. We'll keep you posted. And with that, thank you. And yeah, enjoy the DroidCon.